Welcome to the Light Cellar Podcast, brought to you by Light Cellar, a place where you can learn to find and craft your own food and medicine. In this interview series, you will meet a range of characters in the health and wellness space that are bringing light to your everyday. You'll hear from a number of different experts on a wide variety of topics. We have several different series within the podcast, including our Wild Wisdom and Storytelling with Blaine and Andrusek, the Rays of Light, inspiring wellness in the community, plus solo casts, Q&As, and other topics for you to enjoy. You can find this as a video version, as well as the audio on any of your favorite platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with somebody you know who will benefit. You can also shop online at lightcellar.ca.
Okay.
We're back.
One more time.
Yeah, right on. Welcome, everybody.
We got lots to cover today, and a lot of it is talking about intestinal parasites, which I just mentioned this to a woman over breakfast this morning, and she said, "Well, what do you mean I have worms?" And I said, "Well, everybody's got worms." And it's a creepy thing. I love watching audiences squirm when I bring this up, that by cell count, not by weight or whatever, the number of organisms living in and on your body outnumber you. So each one of us is like a walking zoo.
Yeah.
And we've got, it's to the point just like in your bed mattress, there are little mites that eat your dead skin flakes. And then there's bigger critters that eat those. Like it's creepy.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is something when for a little while I was selling Electrolux vacuum cleaners. That's oddly enough what I did to raise money to buy any equipment I needed before I did my runaway to live in the woods trip.
Oh, no way.
I needed some cash, and I didn't want to lie to anybody about working for them for the rest of my life. And one of my friends said, he was like the manager of a vacuum cleaner distributor, actually for the whole province. And he said, "Well, then come and sell some vacuum cleaners." No. He's, "Look, I got nothing to lose. You'll sell some machines. You might even fall in love with the job and not even go on your silly trip. Or when you get back, if you want, there's a job waiting for you."
Right.
So it went quite well. But I was quite right away taught by one of the older salesmen. He took me straight to a yard goods store. And I said, "Oh, do they need a vacuum?" He said, "No, see that big sign? I already sold them one." Okay. So he had me buy a yard or two of, I think they were out of black, but we bought this just really dark navy blue. He said, Are you at home with your parents for a while? Does your mother sew?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, have her cut these in squares about so big and hem them just so they look neater." And he showed me how to neatly fold them and stuff them up pockets and sleeves and things, so that if you got in the door for a demonstration,
yeah,
you would show the housewife that this is a brand new machine, and you stuff the cloth into the bag and fold it over and very closely close the lid. So you just do a few yards by the front door and already take a bag out because it's full of gravel and stuff, and you just leave it on the floor.
Right.
And you get about another 10 feet in the house, and you do that again. Mm-hmm. And before long, she thinks she's got a clean home,
right,
but before long, there's just piles of dirt and stuff all over the place. So you try and convince them you don't have to take the bedding off or anything. I just want to use the power nozzle to just, doesn't matter if you got stained sheets or anything, we're just going to lift up one corner and vacuum with the power nozzle at your mattress.
Right.
And so when you do that for just a minute, you end up with like half a cup of very obviously dead skin, because it's exactly this color.
Right.
You know? And so that's how much skin is coming off you. It's one of the major creators of dust in your home. It's just dead skin flakes. You know?
Yeah.
And there's critters that live in your bed mattress that eat that. Mm-hmm. And that's just creepy. You know? But if you thought about that long enough, when you pull the covers back, you wouldn't even want to get in there tonight.
Right.
But it's a good excuse to vacuum your bed mattress more often. Maybe every time you do the sheets of laundry or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not what we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah.
But in a way it is, because we're just talking about parasites.
Parasites. We're going to go into digestion. There was a couple of great questions that came out of the last video, so we kind of pulled those forward. We're going to talk about that today. So it's going to be great. chat, great conversation. This is Blaine Andrusek. You're listening to Wild Wisdom and Herbal Storytelling. Yeah.
We got us some stories, don't we?
That's right. Yeah. Well, let's start with you recently attended our Holistic Practitioner Night, which was a great event. We had just about 30 people there, and this brings people in the Calgary area, local, to Light Cellar for an evening to connect, to chat about business ideas and strategies, and just meet other like-minded folks. And sent everybody home with a gift. Well, it was their choice. One I described as more of that kind of like, go get 'em, young type of like, what do you need, right? As an entrepreneur, do you need that a little bit of extra push and drive? And that was the pine syrup. I don't know if you got to try that actually. Let's give you a little taste here. But it's the young pine needle tips, just when they're first growing. Mm-hmm. It's pine boughs, a little bit of the resin, and then some of the pine pollen makes a nice, delicious. I'll give you that to just go for. So some were drawn to that. I kind of shared the story where I'd been using pine just as an experiment, for an entire year. Took it every day, and it has that like energy.
You've honeyed this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's quite sweet.
Yeah, it's a syrup. That's nice, eh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should make you grow tall and stand strong.
Well, I'm feeling a little tingle go all through my upper body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So there's a lot of spring energy in that bottle with the tips and with the pine pollen and the nature of the pine pollen. So I shared a story about working with another herbalist. We were doing a plant walk, and it was kind of August, and she was just feeling that seasonal shift, the winding down, summer was coming to an end, and she was like just embracing that energy of, it's time for that transition and autumn, and, getting into that like nice, just, I was like, I'm not.
Some bear energy, getting ready to hibernate.
Yeah, where I was still in that like spring energy, taking the pine pollen and just like, and there's a time and a place for that, like.
You were probably making her crazy.
Yeah. So, there's herbs out there that can, give you that push, that drive. Little testosterone oomph from the pine. So we had that. Or kind of on the opposite spectrum, sometimes as an entrepreneur, small business owner, you just need to like, rest, relax, clear the air, energetically, shift. So we had some beautiful Sweetgrass hydrosol that I'd created, and this is the one that you wanted. So
I've heard of people making this, but I'd never encountered some before. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just face it.
There you go.
And so for me, this is like liquid smudge.
Totally. Yeah, smokeless smudge.
Smokeless smudge.
And it was actually a common friend of ours, Ganada. He's got connections to Indigenous people up in northern Manitoba that had harvested all this, braided it. And so he does a lot of work in palliative care, all the way to going to people's homes, like this, that, and the next thing. And he said sometimes, when wanting to bring in sweetgrass to a facility, it's a bit of a hurdle, getting permission, like, okay, if we got, you got to explain, we got to burn the sweetgrass. And just the idea of like the smoke and things indoors will...
Yeah, and like I can't even light a candle in my room.
Right.
In the home.
Yeah. So this kind of thing, smokeless, you get the same energy, the same effects, and in fact, it's more kind of like moisturizing to the air. And energetic is like...
I think I'm in place saying heart chakra stuff. It's very opening because it's so bringing us in touch with spirit. And I mentioned to you the other day, I think in the car or wherever, that maybe it was just after the show. Mm-hmm. I think it's an important one for men because men grow up too often with this little boys don't cry and you have to have a stiff upper lip and all of those phrases, which create, a lot of men have deep-rooted emotional issues.
Yeah.
And some of the women, including my ex-wife, who work with flower essences a lot, some of their biggest success stories are men.
Right.
Because they've got physical problems based on emotional issues.
Right.
So, like, we're going to talk about constipation in a moment. You can have people hold their stress in different places. And so some people are chronically constipated because they're just uptight a lot.
Yeah.
And very often these are very successful people.
Right.
You'll see, I think they have a care session even at the foothills in the morning where these people are coming in to get some essentially Pedialyte, because when you have, this is for diarrhea now, but where they're uptight in general and their weakest link is the bowel, and so you end up with strictures. The symptom is diarrhea, but you're actually constipated.
Right.
And only water can get through.
Yeah.
So we need to get people just calming down, because they're uptight, it makes the bowel uptight. That's their weakest place, you know? So
yeah.
This is, as much as I use essential oils like Melissa or Rose to deal with grief, this is another option. And it's kind of, it's been funny over the years where we might be out on a herb walk and somebody say, well, then where do you find sweetgrass? And I said, well, ironically, it's everywhere and nowhere. It's more out on the open prairie, but it's in the foothills too.
Right.
And I've looked to, maybe I have an indigenous member of the class, and I'll just look, Sharon, we need to find some sweetgrass. She said, okay. And within 30 feet, I'll just notice a few plants growing right in the middle of the trail.
Right.
And I said, oh, Carol, there's your sweetgrass, you know, and
Yeah.
it's that common. But I don't notice it unless it's in flower.
Oh, okay.
Because it has a very distinctive flower.
Yeah.
Where otherwise the grass just looks like any other grass.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember my botany here with the subtending, a composite arrangement that's subtending. Anyway, the little branches that come off the main stem, and then the flowers are out. So there's it's called a raceme, when you have an arrangement where there's little flowers coming off the main stem on a short stem, and they look, it's almost like that ribbon that you can wrap up a gift with, and then you run scissors or your fingernail even over the ribbon, and it goes, it forms, you know?
Yeah.
And it looks like that. It looks plugged in. It's got a Jimi Hendrix look, you know, with, it's got this, it's often purplish in color, and it's got this little kinky thing, and so the whole arrangement will be about this high with all the little branchlets, and they're kinky.
Okay.
And then you can just stroke one of the blades and go, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it has vanillin,
Right.
vanilla inin, which gives it, that's part of where the sweetness comes from.
Yeah.
So you know you don't have quackgrass. You
Right.
definitely have sweetgrass. And then you can,
Yeah.
if you look around, there's probably a lot. And I just took on one occasion 3 or 4 roots and introduced them to a little corner of my yard, and
really?
it just got quite comfy there.
Oh, nice.
And in my front yard garden, because I'd planted it intermittently, it had to fight for light with rose bushes and things.
Right.
So it grew extremely tall. Like sometimes out in Baldass Prairie, where it's sunny and whatnot, the grass may only get about 8 inches high.
Right.
And if it's healthy enough, it'll bloom still, but you don't get enough to braid with.
Yeah.
You might still be able to harvest some to put in a mixed powdered smudge where you throw a charcoal in there in a bowl kind of thing. But, because very often braids don't burn that well on their own.
No, it's true.
You know? And if I noticed the ones that you have in the shop, which I thought were outstanding value,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That compared to the way I would braid, I'm doing really tight braiding, and those are very loosely done.
Right.
So they're getting more length, but I doubt that those would burn well.
Right.
But you could just sit there and light it or whatever. Or sometimes with smudge sticks I would make with Artemisia, with the wild sage,
Yeah.
I would put some sweetgrass in it, almost like the jelly in a Bismarck, so that it burns well, and you can note the sweetgrass along with the
nice
the sage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know another common use, and I've done this for years, is a little sweetgrass braid on the dashboard of the car. And I've got it right over the vent.
And an eagle feather for me.
Yeah, there you go.
And the car is in a bubble. It's protected.
Totally. Yeah. And then, in the winter, if you've got the heat cranked, you get that nice light, aromatics coming up.
When we were driving home we had to go to just outside of Edmonton Airport to meet the breeder that I got my high content wolf hybrid from.
Yeah.
And this little guy was just chewing on anything and everything, including my sweater. And I was just fumbling around looking for something else he could chew. And when he got the sweetgrass braid, because it was, like you said, on the dashboard, he started chewing on that and just mellowed right out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bitter. I actually ended up taking a sip of this just to try it. And it's like, strong, like very bitter.
Yeah?
Yeah. You can have a swig or a spritz in your mouth, see what you think. Did you ever use sweetgrass internally? I've only ever...
No.
Yeah, it's just more of that kind of aromatic. You getting anything off that?
Well, not that I would comment on. I'm not sharing your comment.
No, let's see. Here. Yeah.
Maybe it's just that my tongue is still coated with the honey from the...
No, it's subtle. Yeah. I think, I'd taken a sip like right when I was making it. And it's nice though. I like that. It's got, it's those coumarins, that vanillin, same as what tonka bean has in it as well. Yeah. Okay, neat stuff. Well, we're going to be diving into the topic of digestion today. So should we start off on that first comment? There was a question about, apple cider vinegar and, they tried all these things and...
Yeah, and the way the question came from the gentleman without interchange, I just wanted to make sure. So he claimed to have tried virtually everything, including apple cider vinegar, and a lot of different blends and products he was saying that what he had wasn't heartburn, it was, what was he using for another word? But anyway, he would still get, at times, when things fired up, nothing would work. And I just wanted to make sure that he was using the apple cider vinegar correctly, because you don't use it when you have symptoms of heartburn. You do just to get the ratios right, it's a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to a teaspoon of honey, and just enough warm water to dissolve the honey.
Yeah.
But you must do that about 20 minutes before a meal, especially a protein meal. You don't use it symptomatically once you're in trouble.
Right.
You do it before the meal because it helps acidify the stomach and so forth. So just to make sure that's clear. But the only other thing that we both came up with was making kind of a slurry with any of the top demulcents, and highest on the list would be slippery elm, and another one is marshmallow, which has nothing to do with Kraft marshmallows directly.
Right.
The mallow family is very mucilaginous, and you could make a slurry, as opposed to a cup of tea, you could take some boiled water and make something that was almost a bit gooey.
Yeah.
So that when you swallow some, it would coat from the throat down.
Yeah.
And that might put the fire out. And I think that's about all we came up with. I haven't dealt with that.
Harmonic Arts has a great formula. So it's got slippery elm, it has marshmallow, it has fennel and fenugreek. And I think they call it songbird, So again, good, very soothing for the throat, but it's all the way down, and that kind of slimy, mucilaginous quality that it gets, that's the magic that you're after.
Yeah, so that's our only suggestion for that one.
Yeah, and one of the staff, she's a herbalist, and she says she always prefers to basically cold infuse marshmallow root and slippery elm. I'm like you. I've typically used hot water, not necessarily boiling, but warm to kind of activate, because we're working with bark. Root there. So yeah, she had a preference of doing kind of a cold infusion, letting it sit overnight to get that kind of slurry as you're talking about. But I would say either works.
Okay.
Cool.
Now, another thing that happens that didn't come up at all is that sometimes people will have problems like heartburn. I had used the whole description of how the lower parts of the stomach, the mucous membranes, are a lot thicker to protect the stomach from itself.
Right.
And as you get higher in the stomach, those are thinner, and by the time we're getting up towards the throat, they're very, very thin. And when things are held back because you didn't chew your food long enough or whatever, it's when food is held in the stomach too long that your hypoacidity gets too high and bubbles around and irritates the throat and surrounding tissues. But another reason that can occur is constipation. Because if you're chronically constipated, your stomach knows it has no place to ship because you're all backed up.
Yeah.
So things sit in the stomach way too long, and that's another way the stomach's going to churn and work too long, and all of that. Hypoacidity is enough to damage those tender tissues.
Right.
So that's something else to consider as well.
Yeah, there's so much, digestion, all about that. Making sure one's regular, like don't start a liver cleanse without making sure your bowels are moving. We're going to talk about parasites. That was another point that you mentioned as well. It's like make sure those bowels are moving, that you're regular, and that they're proper, because somebody might be going to the bathroom once, twice, 3 times a day, but if it's, more that kind of watery diarrhea, right, that also, again, indication of things aren't as they should be.
We've got certain indicator foods, like, when you eat beets, for example, you should have dark-colored urine, before long.
Yeah.
And dark stool.
Yeah. And
especially something like corn. If you eat corn on the cob tonight for supper and you don't see anything in the toilet until Tuesday, you've got some work to do.
Yeah.
So people argue about the proper transit time, the time it takes to get from one set of lips to the other. And I usually go with 12 to 16 hours, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
If things go through your body too quick, you're probably not absorbing a lot of the nutrients. Mm-hmm. But if they sit there and just ferment and so forth, you're going to be really gassy and have other problems. So transit time's an issue, and the simple plain truth is that virtually everybody has worms, and people always get squirmy. Are you serious? And back to this, I think I used the quote already, that by cell count, our pets outnumber us. So tapeworms, which are huge, or can be, people have had worms up to over 20 feet long, which is just hard to believe, but it's true. You see it in medical journals and whatnot. And then some of the things like Ascaris, which is one of the ones that you can get from raw pork. So you don't have pieces of worm in your supper, but the larvae or eggs are there.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with tapeworms too, so you can get them out of water or food. But there's various eggs and such that would be on lettuce or whatever, things that you don't cook. So we have children get a lot of what are called pinworms. They're, I don't think, more than 1 centimeter long, but they're visible. They're big enough to see. But there's all sort of microscopic stuff. And I've found it fascinating over the years. We've had people that we determined were malnutritious because of their parasites. And they go in, they save some stool and take it in for testing. And we've had, well, I'll just say stool, that's a polite word, where we fished it out of the toilet bowl with some chopsticks, and let it dry a bit on a paper towel and put it in a Ziploc bag. And you can see things wiggling in there. Like there's worms in there. And they take it to the lab for testing, and they say, no, you don't have any parasites.
Right.
So are they so busy looking through a microscope that a couple of large worms like crawled right off their desk and across the floor and into somebody's shoe? Like I've never had anybody explain that for me.
Right.
How you can have obvious. I remember one for me. I was so disappointed. I had started doing my parasite cleanse and kind of half staring in the toilet each time, and I thought, oh, great, I've got some visible ones, and I had these things that were up to about maybe 3/4 of an inch long, and they looked a bit segmented, and so I kind of saved a few and cleaned them up a little bit, and then remembered that last night I had some popcorn, and something I like to do is chop up some fresh garlic and rosemary with some butter, and put that on my popcorn, and that what I had were rosemary leaves that I hadn't chewed well enough, and the digestive acids had bleached them out, so they were white.
Yeah.
So my success story about the worms turned out to be rosemary leaves.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of anthelmintics, is what they're called, a lot of herbs that will actually kill the parasites. But it's critical, back to this, you just can't do a parasite cleanse if you're constipated, because you'll kill the worms, and then along with everything else in your gut, you've got fresh meat that's going to start fermenting and rotting, and the toxins coming off that can be worse than the worms themselves.
The die-off, right?
Yeah. So some of the big ones, like tapeworms, are often discovered because, like I said, people are somehow mystically losing weight like crazy or whatever, and you probably got them from eggs that were on something you ate. And for anybody that knows, most people do Christmas cactus, the way they grow in segments. Tapeworm grows about the same way and almost that size. They're quite large. So as each segment grows, there's little hooks. I've got photos of this I should have brought. There's little hooks on the end and front and back of each segment, and they just latch into your bowel with their face upstream and sit there with their mouths open, just eating whatever you fed them. And part of the concern is that they get some of your best nutrients, because after a good meal they excrete. They're going to have a poo, let's call it. So there's a proper word for that, but you're now getting excrement from your worms, as well as losing nutrition because they're eating your stuff. Anyway.
And all kinds of approaches. I remember the first time I came across this idea, this concept, I was studying with, what was her? I don't think she was officially a naturopath, but anyways, natural kind of healer, had all her tools, that kind of thing. And she was very rooted in the Essene traditions. And this was the Essene Gospel of Peace, this guy, Edmund Bordeaux-Zakeli. The story goes that he had access to the basement of the Vatican, then the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he came across what later became known as the Essene Gospels of Peace. And very interesting. So in this book, Jesus talks about Heavenly Father, but also the earthly mother. And he talks about how to care for your temple, and he's very prescribes fasting and this kind of thing. And even, enemas, suffer a trailing gourd up thy hinder parts. And he talks about, parasite cleansing. So doing a fast, and then sitting over a bowl of milk, and the devils start to come out, right? You first starve them, you sit over a bowl of milk, and apparently, I've never done this, but you start having all the devils and the demons come out of you.
Well, another thing, we touched on this in the car. I don't care who made the parasite cleanse, you can get things that are in tinctures or in tablets or whatever. And sometimes they'll say just use this twice a day for 30 days or something like that.
Right.
And I don't care who made it. I don't agree with the dosage they're suggesting, because a lot of, especially the larger parasites, know they've got a good home in you.
Right.
But they want the kids to have a fresh start in a new land, like, go west, young man, leave the farm, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so towards full moon, like a lot of nature in our world runs with moon cycles. We tend to plan, when I'm planning my holidays to go back home and fish for the summer, we always want to ideally fish right on the full moon. That's always when we catch the trophies. Or second best time is on new moon.
Right.
Because something similar happens there. And in the ocean, that's when the tides, you want to be on the water at either full or slack tide, because that's when the fish don't have to fight the current.
Right.
So they might be hiding in kelp beds and stuff. So when you get that slack water, which is easier to troll in anyway, you go along the edge of kelp beds and they'll dart out for your lures, right? That sort of thing. Anyway, that's getting off topic somewhat. But so the females will migrate closer to the anus to lay their eggs. And just the migration that's happening, there's this kind of subconscious, I'll look at classes sometimes when I know the full moon's tomorrow, and people are doing this thing where they cross and can uncross their legs and kind of squirm a little bit. I've watched people at airports on the phone. It's like, I remember this one fellow that was like, beep, 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 beep. Hi, hon, yeah, no, and he's leaning against a pole and kind of, pressing up against a pole and sliding up and down. And we're going to be stuck here for a couple hours. There's a big blizzard in Winnipeg. And like, it's almost hilarious to watch how people, it's subconscious. They're not aware they're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's because they're getting a little bit of squirmy feeling, even an itchy butt.
Yeah.
You'll see dogs dragging their hind end across a lawn, sort of thing. So I think that's well scientifically documented that they migrate closer to the surface to lay their eggs. So that's when you want to come on with the highest dose.
Right.
So I would rather see people take, if you've got 30 days worth of pills, I would rather see you take, even a couple of months in a row, take 10 pills centered on the week of the full moon, like with the full moon in the middle, and then wait another 20 days or whatever till the next month, and take another 10 pills. Like, I think you get more bang for your buck that way.
Yeah, those 2 cycles, because you kill the mama that just laid the eggs, but then her eggs are there, they hatch, and then that next cycle you can go after them, is the theory.
So you had mentioned, was it cramps, or what was it that you've had formulas, even your own or something, that caused some sort of issue? Something to do with discomfort? With artemisia in particular?
It's not ringing a bell.
No? Just the other day when we were talking or texting?
Right.
No?
No, I can't remember.
Okay, well, enough. So
is that from like taking a anti-parasite formula?
Yeah.
And getting discomfort?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Artemisia frigida, which is one of our wild sages here in Alberta, is very bitter. And that's one of the best ones for, the top herbs for the big worms are, I would put our own wild sage and something called male fern at the top of the list. And then as we get into pinworms, which are very common in children because they play in the garden or whatever and chew their nails and fingers in their mouth, just that sort of thing. Pinworms are common, and black walnut husks are one of the very best there. So those would be the top 3. And I wanted to make a blend that would cover all the bases, from the big ones to the little ones. So, and yesterday when this came up and we were going to do this today, I haven't used it for a while, and I don't have any of my formulas anymore because those went with the sale of my business, and I was hoping I could even find somebody that would have blank labels, even, so that we had a label, somebody that might have a bottle around.
Yeah.
So I got a hold of, it took me a while to come up with the 7, and I finally got them.
Yeah. And the name of your formula was?
Para 7.
Para 7.
I just wasn't after, no, where did I go wrong? There we go. Is that how I want to do it?
Yeah, looks like. Let's just see here. There we are.
Okay. So ideally, you wake up in the morning and you're hungry, so are your pets. So let's give them a full head-on shot for breakfast. So take them on an empty stomach. So what have I written here? I should have brought my reading glasses.
Yeah, I can read it.
I think I can.
Yeah, okay. Para 7 tinctures, best taken on empty stomach.
Yeah, stop there.
Okay.
So first thing in the morning, that's your first shot for the day.
Yeah. First thing in the morning with nothing other than water to follow for at least 1 hour. Use at least 5 mils or 1 teaspoon twice daily for 7 to 10 days at time of full moon. Repeat 2 or 3 consecutive months. Ensure bowel moving is moving regularly, using herbal laxatives if required. And contains equal parts wormwood, male fern, black walnut hull, pumpkin seed, clove, fennel, and thyme.
And the idea with things like fennel is that due to the phenylpropanes is the chemical group. Any of the licoricey smelling herbs or essential oils, those compounds are very, very sedative. So the reason we have fennel in a blend like that is that it actually kind of makes the worms, like remember what I was saying about how the tapeworms are clamped onto your bowel? And fennel tends to make them somewhat drunk or literally anesthetized, and they loosen their grip and might even fall off.
Right.
In fact, we've had the bowel tonic I used to always use, and I'm not sure if it's available anymore. There was a couple of transfers when Terry's blends were sold to Trophic, and they kind of cherry-picked the blends, and some they quit making. And some of his best stuff, like he had BEVC and LBT3 and a few things, were some of my favorite formulas. I used them a lot with my client patients in my practice, and we lost some of those along the way. But anyway, the point is that we would have people reporting a lot of parasite loss just using a good bowel tonic.
Right.
Right, and so I was touching on Senna at the start of the show. Senna is something that if you're usually regular, but maybe you're under sudden stress or you're traveling or something and you become constipated, Senna tea works exceedingly well, but it should only be used for short periods because the nervous system controlling your bowel will get addicted to it.
Right.
Where something like Cascara sagrada has a couple of different ingredients that work on the nervous system. So you got that, just like the arteries when I was talking about the vascular system last week or the week before. So you got a tube controlled by round muscles. And one of the ingredients is saying, would you mind tightening up your show here for a while? And oh, okay. And then the parasympathetic comes in, no, don't listen to him, relax. So the muscles controlling the bowel say, tighten up, relax, tighten up, relax, tighten up, relax. And I always warn people using a formula like that, high-end Cascara sagrada, if you're a truck driver, long-distance truck driver, don't start taking this when you're on the road.
Right.
Take it on your days off, right?
Yeah.
Because of that action, sometimes when you got to go, you don't get much warning.
Yeah.
You know? But that's how it works, is it? So flaking, caking, of stool on the lining of the bowel tends to just fall off.
Right.
And along with any worms in it.
Yeah.
So, that's got a lot to do with why the fennel's in there. And then clove, of course, is a very, very powerful antibiotic, anti-parasite, antiviral even. And so that's working on the little guys.
Yeah.
And the pumpkin seed I'd forgotten about because I've never used it on its own, are kind of right in the middle there with the pinworms and such.
Right, okay.
So we're dealing with everything, and thyme, I think, is in there as well.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with microscopic stuff as well as things that you can see.
Great.
And I had excellent success with that formula because of the clove and the fennel, it didn't really taste bad.
Right.
And even children seemed to be okay with it. And you could put that in a cup of tea if you wanted to kind of dilute it, or it would be okay if you used it with some honey. But we wanted to always take it on an empty stomach.
Yeah.
And that's why if you did it twice a day, it'd be like before supper when you were again quite hungry. You got an empty stomach, and it would kind of go in by itself and do a better job, as opposed to pouring it in your pasta sauce.
Right.
Yeah.
And so obviously you found, because we carry a couple of different parasite products. One is liquid tincture, another one is capsules. You are obviously more partial to tincture, but they both work in that regard? Or did you find tincture was a little more efficacious?
It's just that in my dispensary, I had a whole whack of tinctures.
Right, yeah.
So I just made a liquid blend.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion of, starting with something like Cascara sagrada, like start there, get the bowels moving. You might even, as you mentioned, clear some parasites to begin with, but regardless, it's going to help, make sure those channels are open and moving so that when you do start working on the parasites, they're coming out. They're not hanging around.
Yeah, you don't want freshly killed rabbits rotting in your belly.
So you mentioned senna, short period of time. How would you define short period of time? I mean, that could be days, that could be weeks. Short is always relative in that way.
Personally, I've never had problems in that area. I'm super regular.
Yeah.
But once in a while, like sometimes it happens when you end up for surgery, for example.
Right.
You're in the hospital and you can be dehydrated, or some of the meds you're on can affect you that way.
And you're traveling and your whole system gets thrown off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So short term might be just like a week or whatever, just till you're back to normal.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would never use it by itself. It's okay if it's in a blend, just not by itself for long periods.
Yeah.
If you see senna in a blend with cascara and some other things, that's okay. I'm not saying it's a bad herb.
Right. Yeah.
It does its job very well.
Yeah. Cascara, that's one of those ones I've known about forever, but only recently did I discover it grows all throughout BC. Yeah, I had never actually, I just assumed, just even the name, it sounds very exotic, right? It's coming from, South America or Africa or something like that. But no, here we've got it in Canada.
Dorothy, that's Yarrow's mother, has a tree in her yard.
Right.
And it produces fruit, or am I mixing two stories here with an apple tree? Anyway, somehow a bear was in her yard, and her dog scared it up the tree.
Right.
And it was eating, I'm just going to go with, and I might be wrong, it was eating the cascara berries, or it had eaten apples for something to do with the fruit.
Yeah.
And the dog was too scared to come out of the tree, so it stayed in the tree for like 4 days and just shit itself severely. So there was just a pile of bear poop all around the bottom of this tree.
Well, good fertilizer.
In the long run.
Yeah. Cool.
But it's important it's one of those things where the more that you eat, ironically, the more that you eat nothing but processed food, it's less likely that you'll be exposed to parasites.
Right.
But the more that you, myself for example, drink lake and stream water and barely wash, like I don't want to peel a carrot. To me, that's just an issue. The more that you pull things out of the ground and barely wash them, or I hate seeing people pick aromatic herbs and wash them severely, stuff like sage or whatever. Yeah. Like you're losing a lot of the goodness, scrubbing them.
Yeah.
So the more that you eat things closer to the earth, literally, the more exposed you're going to be to parasites, I suppose. So we've got a healthier diet is exposing you to more parasites.
Right.
So we've got this oxymoron thing going on there.
And then, of course, pet owners could be a little bit more susceptible.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because
I have no hesitation using something like that blend that I used to make. And it was quite ironic that I saved a small cow herd once.
Oh, really?
There was a woman somewhere in BC around 100 Mile House who had bought a calf. She had, I don't think, a lot of animals. I'm just going to guess and say 7 to 10 cows. And she bought a new calf at an auction, and it was infected with something and had major diarrhea that got into the mud, and then they tromp around in it, and somehow the other animals were getting infected. And she had 2 vets working on this calf, and nothing was working. And one of her neighbors had bought my tincture blend in the health food store in, I don't know what's closest there to 100 Mile House, but and it worked perfectly on the calf.
Right.
So she was on the phone to see if she could get a bulk supply to treat the other animals, and ended up taking a couple of liters of tincture, and got back to me later just saying, thank you so much, the animals were all fine within a couple of days. So it works on cows too.
Yeah.
So we know cows and dogs.
Right.
I don't know about cats.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me actually, the woman that I studied with, she was very into horses. She just had this kind of connection to animals. And some of the great kind of healers, because, people and their pets, especially if it's a horse where it's, high value stakes, or people that love their dog so much, some of the principles of kind of just, taking care of physiology and health are still really forefront, in veterinary medicine, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding parasites, clearing those out, whereas somehow, when it translates to humans, we've lost that. But she got a lot of inspiration from her kind of connection with animals and veterinary studies, and it's just like, well, if it happens in animals, like we're an animal too, and there's that carryover.
Yeah, I have friends from the dog park that working both ways. Ended up taking the pills the vet had recommended for their dog's arthritis, for their own problems. And the other way around, where somebody had mentioned to their vet dealing with a very arthritic pet, glucosamine and chondroitin, and it was like, really? And then he did a little bit of research, and he made it part of his veterinary practice after learning from the patient's, that the dog's a patient's owner.
Right.
Sharing that bridge.
Yeah. Another, this is more of a medication, but ivermectin. I know a lot of people have had success parasite cleansing with that.
Grapefruit seed extract.
Yeah, that's been around a long time. It's kind of less prevalent now, at least maybe in the circles that I'm with, but I remember when I first started, getting into this realm, working at a health food store, GSE, grapefruit extract was a big one. I took that to India with me so many decades ago as part of my protocols.
Yeah.
But you don't hear as much about that one anymore.
Well, it might have fallen out, I think, around a campfire at one of our big, whether it was a conference or just a herb walk weekend or something. Todd Caldecott, who'd come from England, and I'm pretty sure it was Todd, while sitting around the fire, somehow that came up. And he said, well, there's actually nothing in grapefruit seed extract that's anti-anything.
Right.
It's the whatever solvent they were using to make the tincture was what was actually doing the work.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was maybe that's why it fell from grace.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I remember hearing that. Yeah. And who knows what they were using as a solvent. But I remember it had a very bitter taste anyways. And last time I seen somebody using it, they were using it to wash their vegetables, like kind of a rinse.
Yes, there was Yes, there was products you could buy at the health food store that you would wash. Yes, exactly. So you didn't have to worry about anything on the outside of your anythings. I was creeped out a couple of days ago. I was on the phone with somebody and I was just staring at a box that my old friend had brought me a plant in. So it was a 25 pound of tomatoes box.
Right.
Right. And I was sitting there at about the distance your foot is, reading not may or may not contain, but we use vegetable-based propane. No.
Right.
It was actually called. Well, I'm just missing the word here.
Yeah.
But it was like an oil, like not vegetable oil, but
petroleum.
Petroleum. Maybe it was just petroleum beeswax.
Right.
How can you say petroleum beeswax? How would that even be legal to get on a label?
For sure.
And I was just sitting there, really?
Yeah.
Or shellac of some sort sprayed on the tomatoes to maintain freshness.
Yeah.
And I just
It's crazy. Yeah, and you don't often see that as a consumer because it's on the box, but unless you're buying
just
a whole
buying
giant,
some tomatoes out of the bin at the store.
And in fact, citrus is notorious for that as well.
Yes, that was one of my first things to go organic with was lemon.
Right.
Because I used to use lemon in my tea all the time, and I'd quarter a lemon and make my herbal tea and put it in, and you'd see this waxy film on top, and somebody told me, well, that's all the spray. That's floating around. So, and organic lemons.
So it's a spray, but it's also the same as the tomato. It's to kind of like seal it, so it maintains the freshness. Yeah.
And
the petroleum.
Organic lemons are seldom much more expensive than regular lemons at all. It's usually a very small margin of difference.
Yeah.
Another thing that I might not have ever figured out on my own, but when my father was still alive and in visiting one day, he was having a banana off my kitchen counter, and it was looking not completely brown or anything, but quite ripe, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he was eating this banana, and he was saying, like, where did you get these bananas? The bananas I get at home, to this brown, and I'm going to just say it because this is a quote, they're like shit, and so I'd never realized that organic bananas, which aren't, again, overly expensive, are actually a bargain because they can be more into ripeness and they're still perfectly firm on the inside.
Right.
Like you can have organic bananas that are completely brown on the outside, and we should really eat bananas when they're still half green. That's when you get the best nutrients and very little sugar.
Right.
By the time they're fully ripe, they're like sugar bowls.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, you'll never throw out an overripe organic banana. So to me, they're actually a bargain.
Right.
Because they just last longer.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we covered some good ground today.
I think so.
Yeah. Anything else?
They think so.
Top of the mind? Let's see. Look at our colors here. We're matching. Anything else on top of mind for you? We did have a couple of those questions came in. Yeah, and I think what you were saying before, I'd sent you something. That was one of the questions that we had got about. I'd just forgotten what it was specifically. Taking the parasite herbs and kind of the intestinal discomfort that can come from it.
And that's where stuff like, if it was to me a good blend, you'd have the fennel in there, and then it takes the bitterness away.
Yeah, and calms things down.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was when I was learning more about aroma chemistry. I remember having a giggle looking at the list of things high in those particular phenylpropanes and thinking about how one of my friends all the way back to high school was trying to describe, like he drank a whole bottle of Sambuca.
Oh, yeah.
Or Ouzo, one of the two.
Yeah.
And those are the high licoricey things.
Yeah.
And anisette is a little lighter and sweeter, but Ouzo and...
There was Pernod as well.
Pernod, yeah, the French one. And he was trying to describe that it was a really different drunk. He was really sort of sedated.
Right.
And I just started laughing, and I thought, because you were anesthetized, like those are our first anesthetics,
right? Is there any connection between anise and anesthetized? I know they're spelt differently, but just how you're pronouncing it, it sounds.
No, you may be quite right.
Yeah.
Anesthetics came along quite late in terms of modern medical practices. People used to have to go through, like you see it in Western movies, but the whole like bite on a stick, so you don't scream kind of thing.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Hey?
And when we go back to, as I was studying fairly recently, both Louis Pasteur and Dr. Lister is who I was most interested in. I had to wonder if they ever had a chance to meet, because they were about the same age.
Yeah.
Late 1800s, made it into the 1900s, and both made it to about the age of 80. So Dr. Lister, I would bring up in my aroma classes, because I knew he was an oral surgeon that was trying to do some new techniques, and was having problems because he'd get horrible infections and whatnot. So he had to find ways of doing, and he ended up using essential oils as irrigations in the mouth, kind of thing. And yes, it isn't a myth, but this is the Dr. Lister that ended up with Listerine. Started out as a surgical aid.
Yeah.
And so when I studied him, he wasn't just an oral surgeon. He started out as a surgeon. And at that time, when he started his career, I think your chance of surviving any surgery was about 20%.
Right.
And part of that was just if they even had the word sepsis yet, it was because, if I was the surgeon and I'm about to cut you open, I might have dried blood on my smock from 2 patients ago.
Yeah.
And all they had to clean their equipment with was acetic acid. They would just wash
and vinegar.
Scalpels and things with vinegar.
Yeah.
And he was the one that started using carbolic acid, which was something they used to reduce sewage odors.
Ah.
And they ended up using that for the equipment, and he's the one who came up with the concept of, but there must be, because Louis had come along with his germ theory, there's stuff in the air. Like, still one of our biggest killers in the world is malaria, which, if you think about it, is mal, which means bad, bad area. And because they would only get malaria around stinky swamps.
Right.
They didn't figure out for quite a while that it was the mosquitoes that were involved, right? They just thought the bad air was doing it.
Yeah.
And so it was Dr. Lister who came up with the idea of putting this carbolic acid into the air somehow. So he was the one, he made the first diffuser.
Right.
Now every aroma company has some kind of diffusers, right, to sweeten the air or sterilize the air or whatever. But that came from Dr. Lister of Listerine fame.
Right.
And the problem with the carbolic acid was that it was quite strong, and if you had too much of it open near the surgeons, it was definitely bothering their throats.
Right.
Because it was burning a little bit, so he had to find some ways around that. But he did invent the first diffusers for using in surgical suites.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's fascinating, hey?
And Louis' career started with his first contracts that he was paid for were to make sure wine didn't spoil.
Ah.
That's where his whole studies grew from.
Yeah.
He was hired by wineries.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and I know Pasteur, like especially the terrain theory people, really kind of gets put down of like, he was all wrong. It's all the terrain, the microbe is nothing. But it makes sense if he was studying wine. Well, what turns wine into vinegar? Well, it's acetic acid bacteria.
Yep.
It's definitely a microbe that was part of that transformation. So. From that level of thinking, you can see where his mind then, started connecting other dots.
Well, and I mean, his whole story was that he was the first one to look at things with a microscope and realize that there were microbes involved.
Right.
And that's where it was called the bacteria theory.
Yeah.
Or germ theory.
Yeah.
And for a lot of that is still valid.
Totally.
If you cut a finger and don't treat it and you're around something very bacteria-ish, you're going to get infected right away.
Yeah.
So germ theory was real. But by the end of his career, he's quoted as saying, wait, the microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything, meaning, back to what I just said, what are you exposed to from outside or inside your body?
Right.
With the microbes were still involved, but the terrain, hence there could be a bad cold or flu going around the office, and some people, maybe a third of the staff get sick and the other 2/3 don't.
Yeah.
Why? Because their lungs are clear.
Yeah.
And the airborne viruses aren't affecting them as much.
Totally. Well, and I love the analogy, the mosquitoes don't create the swamp creates the mosquitoes, or the conditions for mosquitoes to grow and to thrive.
Yeah, because long enough ago, people had the what was it called? Spontaneous generation was the expression.
Right.
That dirty corners in the basement just spontaneously generate spiders.
Right. For sure. Yeah. And then, like really what takes terrain theory even deeper, and we even touched upon it today, right, is like the emotional terrain, right, which then manifests physical conditions. So it's a deep rabbit hole.
Who you are, it's part of who you are becomes what you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Complex beings live in this most incredible, fascinating life.
We are made out of so few elements, like carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen.
Right, the primary.
Are 96% of your body weight.
Yeah.
So you'd think we're so simple, and yet we're so complex.
Yeah.
And it can be hard, I know, as a practitioner post. You might have something you think you got it down now, that's helped 20 other client patients. And then you get somebody that it just doesn't even dent.
Yeah.
And why? It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
As you do your practice.
Right.
We are practicing on you. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I always reference that. A practitioner.
Now, where did I see something on Facebook? You got censored?
Oh, yeah.
Do you care to comment on that?
Yeah, sure, we can. For sure, we can get into that. So, you and we've had the conversation about the whole Health Canada.
But this was a whole different level.
Yeah, so Bill C-47, passed, and there was, at that time we were having our conversation, there was a lot of conversations, webinars, people writing in, that type of thing, and it made a good impact and didn't quite do anything. There's a bill currently on the table to reverse it, waiting to see does that have legs, will it actually do it or not. In the meantime, Health Canada has been sending out cease and desist letters to a number of different people, kind of medium-sized companies, as well as just like really small, mamas working out of their home with their kids running around kind of a thing.
But didn't you have an issue with Facebook itself versus YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube specifically. So we had done a webinar bringing together a few folks. It was myself and Allison Ritchie. We hosted. We had Susan Stanfield and Ken Drysdale bringing their thoughts about what's going on. So Ken kind of went in like big, broad scope of like, especially for the last 4 years of what's been going on and how that is all connected. It's all part of the same thing with Health Canada, and essentially like authoritarian governments telling you what you can and cannot do or ingest and so on and so forth. So from that conversation, I posted on YouTube the replay, and I still had it unlisted. It had only been up just a couple of hours because I needed to then go and like grab the title and description and like, flush it all out before making it live.
Right.
And in that time, like, they've got some sort of like AI algorithm that can basically like analyze the entire content down to the word. Said some wrong things. It was out of their,
So this whole level of, it's not fear-mongering that so many people are worried about our freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's real, 100%.
That censorship is happening.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and it's in, again, content, it was unlisted. It wasn't even public. You can have private videos. Like, they've got something going through, combing every single thing that's posted to make sure it's quote-unquote compliant.
Hi.
I've even heard people like, private messages, sending back and forth in their DMs, getting them in trouble. Yeah, and it's all under the guise of, this isn't, outside of the scope of what the WHO says is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, WHO being the World Health Organization.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's very real. And a lot of people, were in the thick of that during the pandemic. You were censored for saying just about anything that, today you can say openly, and because we know it to be true, but back then you weren't allowed to say it. But it continues for sure. So that video was shut down pretty quick. YouTube is one of the worst. I mean, Instagram, Facebook, they're pretty bad as well. So we've shifted that video over to Rumble. Which it's okay. I don't love the platform as much. YouTube is it's got such a base. It's so user friendly, but they've got this censorship complex going.
Well, it reminded me, or what you just said reminded me of. I got into trouble for a day with my Thieves blend.
Oh.
And one of my clients put something like, I wasn't telling anybody to, well, wait a minute, that's not true either. Anyway, using Thieves, which is a centuries-old blend that worked, and it's saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So even by empirical wisdom, we know that this is okay.
Yeah.
But the deal breaker came with one of my accounts with a retail store put something in their online newsletter that they had. Yes, they were promoting it as a hand sanitizer.
Oh.
That was the deal.
Right. Yeah.
As a hand sanitizer. And I don't know if a shopper had taken it home and maybe their husband was a doctor or some such scenario.
Yeah.
That you couldn't have a hand sanitizer that doesn't work below a certain percentage of ethyl alcohol.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And so somebody reported that to Health Canada.
Jeez.
And somebody who didn't know that even the alcohols in something gentle like lavender. So it's a different type of organic alcohols. They're still alcohols, and they're way stronger than ethanol is.
Right.
So you can have something that's less percentage than regular hand sanitizer, which dries out your skin.
Yeah.
One of the people reporting to me supportively said that she had been working in I think it was some sort of, it could have been a home, or maybe it was a daycare. I don't know, something where she had to be constantly using hand sanitizer, like heavily throughout the day, and ended up drying out her skin so much that she was getting other stuff was she dealing with diapers or something? I don't remember. But anyway, she ended up almost losing her hand.
Jeez.
Because of the overuse of hand sanitizer, ruining her skin.
Right.
So she was trying to support me because she had this whole negative story. But yeah, it was the misunderstanding that somebody couldn't look at the formula and realize that the Thieves blend has way more powerful organic alcohols in it than regular alcohol. They were just stuck on, you got to be this percentage or it's not hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So to get it off the shelf.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so I talked to this government person about what I was doing and everything, and I had to call this guy back in Vancouver, and he was wondering how much I'd made and how big this was in the field. And because I told him, I said, look, this wasn't even my idea.
Right.
They asked me to make it. You know, I had this blend, and for other reasons.
Yeah.
And they asked me to make it a hand sanitizer, and I kind of went, well, yeah, this will work. So we just put the Thieves blend into organic aloe vera gel, and it's a nice finish on the skin.
Yeah, amazing.
And great product. It works. And he said, well, how much have you made and whatnot and whatever. And you know, as the more that we talked, I could sense this guy just sitting on the phone thinking, why am I wasting my time here? Right. You know, and I said, so look, how about I'll just quit making it. It wasn't my idea to begin with, so we'll just quit. And he said, sure. You know, like they didn't come after me and raid my home business or anything like that.
Right.
Because the guy just realized it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like you know, what we were talking about.
Oh, it totally is.
And yeah, it's kind of fun when you get through that with. That was it's only happened to me twice that the government was looking at one of my blends, and one of them, and a lot of producers went through this, was all natural bug spray.
Oh gosh,
right?
Yeah.
And there was a few times I'd heard about, they were at Community, for example, once they came in with shopping carts and just took everything off the shelves, and then went in the back room and took everything. They filled a van, but they just seized it all.
Yeah.
And so I got a warning from Cochrane, a little shop there that sold a lot of my products, and she was all panicky about this woman had been in the store, that same sort of thing. Hey, can I help you at all? Oh, do you have any of that like natural bug spray? She said, oh yeah. I mean, and she showed her my sprays, and so the phone call I got was that I thought she'd seized it already, and I had to call this woman. And I called her and I said, well, you know, blah, blah, woof, woof. And I said, so if you haven't thrown it out yet, keep it for yourself, because it really works.
Yeah.
You know? And she says, oh, Blaine, no, I didn't seize anything yet, but I'll be back on Tuesday, and if it's still on the shelf, I'm going to seize it.
Yeah.
You know, so I got talking to her about, well, look, my division, my badge, my job is if there's anything to do with the word bug on the bottle, it's got to have the number.
Right.
And she sent me, I got a package of mail about this thick with all the forms I had to fill out.
Jeez.
And I called her back and I said, look, this is not a big item for me. I probably make about $200 a summer by selling this. So, you know, how about we agree that I'm just going to quit?
Right.
But she was very friendly. Sometimes when people get a job with a badge, they get weird.
Right.
Like game wardens, all sorts of people. You know, hey, I got a badge now.
Yeah.
You know. But she was most friendly, and I said, well, I was just showering yesterday, and it occurred to me, like, what else could I call it? And it works like the cat's meow. That old expression. So I said, what about cat's meow? And she said, oh, well, I'm fine with that, sure. And then I paused and I said, but there must be somebody like you that monitors pet products, right? So then I'm going to have this same conversation with the cat and dog people.
Yeah.
And she, oh, yeah.
Jeez.
So that's where I settled on Summer Breeze.
Ah, there we go.
I just thought about an old Seals and Crofts song.
Right.
And bug isn't mentioned on the bottle, cats aren't mentioned on the bottle. It's just, you know, for helping your summer outdoor events.
Yeah.
That's all it says. But she said, but if I go in a store and ask them for a natural bug spray and the staff take me to your product, I'm still going to seize it.
Jeez. Man, oh man.
So a lot of retailers just quit. They just gave up.
No, they got really insane about all the bug sprays. Yeah.
But the permits she wanted me to get weren't ghastly.
Right.
It just wasn't cost effective for me. It was going to be, I think it was just a few $1,000s. It wasn't like $100,000 or something.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and the challenge is they want that for every single product now. So, you know, a little mom and pop, you know, Herbal, whether they're out of their home or they got a little, you know, farmer's market stand, like if you got 12 products times, you know, how many thousands of dollars.
Yeah, a lot of really good product is going to disappear.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what we're up against. And maybe this recording, I'll post that link down to the forbidden conversation where we talk about Health Canada and get into the details. So if anybody wants to review that, you're welcome. It was a good call, good chat. And I'll probably do a summary of it as well.
But we're going to lose a lot of really good products. And we've got to be fine at saying, bring it up with your MP.
Yeah.
We have voted officials that may or may not even be aware of this happening.
Yeah.
You know, but it's happening.
Yeah, because the original C-47 slipped through in a budget bill. The unfortunate part of it right now is it's kind of stuck in this like partisan stalemate where Liberals and NDP had voted for it, Conservatives voted against, and they're just stuck in that dynamic. So. But hop on the phone, set a person in meeting.
A lot of things are going to disappear.
Yeah, so we got to turn it around. Herbalism will survive as grassroots, but we want it flowering. We want it, reaching everybody.
Well, and one of the things that came up even when we back all this up to more than 10 years ago. Just for a logic factor, on all levels through all of this for the last 2 decades, there was something called compounding allowance.
Right.
Where if I was going to make something for Malcolm because he had gout, and I could make sure that he wasn't pregnant, because he probably won't ever be. And so anyway, when it's a one-to-one, it's me with a patient, client patient. It's my job to make sure that if there's any safety issues or all of that, that we've covered that, because we're one-on-one. But as soon as you put it in a bottle on a shelf where any consumer can come and pick that up, that's when you have to follow all of these parameters, right?
And I get that, fair enough. But as what has been proven, time and time again, that it's excessive most of the time. It's not about health, right? Like just even your example about the thieves and the hand sanitizer, right? Like there's, track record of, potency and use, for centuries. It's effective, but wasn't within their prescribed parameters and not allowed. And so much of this, unfortunately, gets into, just kind of creating the way for big pharma in that sense. This is what herbalism has been up against for a long time. It's competition in that way. So, we'll get through it. And just have that mindset. And I think, the best thing we can do to fight this is exactly what we're doing. We're educating people about herbs. Just even in the short time that I've been into it, I'm in a product of that. Like I didn't come with any of this background. I came to this knowledge like most people of like, oh, wow, what's this all about? That's super cool. Getting into it and it said that 80% of Canadians consume some sort of natural health supplement, and the more that we all go deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole, the people at Health Canada, right? It's like
when I started studying herbology, I never wanted to be a practitioner, and in later years, I definitely didn't want to be a distributor.
Right.
And it just sort of took over my life. I just wanted to learn more because I intended on going back to the bush.
Right.
And I wanted to know, I was studying things like how to, if I had to fix a dislocated shoulder.
Right.
And learning how to do not the usual way, a little further down, but going in through a little cartilage called the cricothyroid cartilage right here, and how you can pull the skin away a little bit. I'd rather use scissors than a knife, and you cut a little hole. And people have saved lives with a person that was would have died of a blocked airway due to an extreme allergy to a wasp sting.
Right.
And they've used a Bic pen for the tube. Right. And poked a hole with something like in the office. Wow. And then break a Bic and put just so you've got a tube in there so they can keep breathing.
Yeah.
People have done that heroically. I've only done it once, and I'm glad I had scissors that were like surgical scissors in my first aid kit.
Wow.
Because it's a lot easier to do this. You don't have to worry about being nervous and slashing a carotid artery. And
right.
We're going to save them from anaphylactic shock, but now they're going to die and bleed out in a minute. Kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway. But I was studying things for first aid by definition is what to do till the doctor gets here.
Yeah.
But what about when there's no doctor for 2,000 miles?
Right.
Or no cell phones or coverage or any of that. That's what I was doing, like long canoe trips and disappearing into the woods and stuff. So it started for me. I was considering going to medical school.
Right.
And then. The real history, this is getting personal, but it doesn't matter, it's true. Dorothy was with some other people sharing a house, and she ended up hooking up with Terry.
Right.
And she called me, like her and I have always been so close, we're just old past lifetime soulmates kind of thing. She called me to say, hey, I kind of hooked up with one of my roommates, so you better come over for dinner and meet this guy because I think I'm going to marry him.
Right.
That's where it all started for me.
Yeah.
So I was considering going to medical school, and I had questions and Terry had answers that just seemed more up my alley, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was off to a wild rose I went. I didn't know I'd end up being an instructor there someday.
Yeah.
That was never a goal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And here I am.
Totally.
Yeah,
and this is the way, empowering each of us, and look where it might lead. You've done more for the industry than you probably ever could have imagined back then, right? And that's how we're going to get through this, is bringing herbalism back as the people's medicine, that first line of defense that's integrated in everybody's lives, that it is what it is. It's a commonplace, and it's not something fringe, and it's not something to be taken over and controlled and regulated. It's just what everybody does. So,
and a lot of things that you did just because Grandma said so, like the chicken soup thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
She didn't know about potassium chloride.
Yeah.
But that's why it works, and it always did work.
Yeah.
But people just did it. Or like when I love mushrooms. When I say, oh my auntie, my grandma knew all about mushrooms. No, she didn't. She knew 15 at best mushrooms that grew where she lived. That she didn't know anything about mycology.
Yeah.
But she just that's a bad one. That's a good.
That's a good one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the exciting part. We can start with those roots, and we can build upon it. Our knowledge, and expand it scientifically. And there's lots to go. But there we are. Well, it was a good chat today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Give it a thumbs up, share it out, and I'll have a couple of resources down below. And if you got any other comments, questions, post them down, and we'll include it in the conversation. And
we'll be back.
See you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to give us a like, share this with someone you know who would benefit, and subscribe so you're up to date with all the new episodes coming out. You can shop online at lightseller.ca, as well as visit us in the heart of Bowness in Calgary, Alberta.